Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming and of course Elden Ring. Today I have a bit of a different video for you. I want to answer the question, what are the most powerful unique weapons in Elden Ring? This being the weapons that can deal the most damage in either say the shortest time in terms of DPS or even in a single hit. This is an important question for those of us wanting to kill bosses extremely efficiently, and maybe with that in mind, something you want to know going into the DLC whenever that finally comes for the bosses we find there. I've picked 10 of my top picks for this kind of output and damage potential. So we're going to work our way from the bottom to the top, starting at number 10, which is the CRANIAL candlestick. I know, I'm blown away by this, but we actually recently tested it after the patch 1.07 made a change to the attack power of the Ash of War, and honestly, it made a huge difference. For quite a few months, a lot of people were saying you should test it, you should try it, it's actually very effective, but the problem with it is that it's quite hard to get off. You will be interrupted, it's a slower animation, and you need to be like right under the target to really get the damage out. But the fact is, this is a lot of fire damage, and you know, a lot of enemies in this game, they're really weak to fire, and where that is the case, this can be insanely effective. It also covers a nice wide range of that, so that damage buff, it made a big impact. And the thing is, you can overcome that threat of being knocked out of it by improving your poise, wearing really heavy armor, combining that with something like an Iron Jar aromatic, and you can basically become immune and spam this fire rain consistently. It is just one of those Ashes of War that allows you to turn yourself to rock and then just start spreading the damage. The output potential of that, again, it's genuinely impressive. All it really took was that little bit of attack power buff to make this really a threat, and it doesn't take much of an effort to make a build that makes that work. So we've been really impressed by that, so it has to be on the list at least. And number 9 is one of my favorite weapons, but one that's sorely just not that used anymore. In 1.0, this is one of the most popular weapons in the game, Hand of Malenia. Using the Ash of War Waterfowl Dance, you can copy Malenia and attack super quick, super fast, and in a reasonable small area around the field. If you get yourself a successive hit build, which is super easy, just a couple talismans and a wondrous physic, you can skyrocket your AR by, all of the consistent hits that happen when you use this Ash of War. Much like the CRANIAL candlestick though, it is vulnerable to be knocked out of. So with some heavy armor and a bit of extra protection, you can make this work, but it is a bit harder to make work. The difference here is the damage you can get, because it's got bleed build up on top of the successive hits, is ridiculous. Like, you can kill bosses in one combination of this, and if you can get 2 full combos off, not much is going to survive because it's going to be in the tens of thousands of damage. The problem is, it is hard to get it off. It requires clever timing and a bit of luck when it comes to, enemy AI. It's undeniable though that it is really powerful when it works, so it's another one I feel deserves a bit of a highlight on the list because its potential is very high. Next, we're going to talk about MOHGWYN'S Sacred Spear, yes, and its Blood Boon ritual, that Ash of War, which was technically nerfed and yet it remains on this list. That's because the nerf only affected the range of the Ash of War, which did affect things generally more in PvP, but even there, it's not that big of a deal. The AoE is still massive, and ultimately, if you can get the full 3-part channel off, which does take a bit of time admittedly, it will deal outrageous bleed damage. Just stupidly high, multiple pops, and your AR is obviously going to skyrocket. When you do it, you buff your weapon to have fire and more bleed with a curse blood. It's one of those weapons where you just spam the Ash of War and kind of laugh if it ever gets to go off. Because it's still got great range, you can start the cast going when, say, a boss is walking over to you, and if it doesn't knock you out of it, it's going to lose most of its health. Get 2 or 3 of those off in even endgame boss fights, and it's over, it's done, you've won. It is just another one that you need to actually sort of work out a build to give yourself as much protection as possible, but with the poise changes, that is more possible in 1.08 and beyond, which is nice. But now we move to number 7, where things get a little bit less awkward and a little bit more straightforward and functional, the Wing of Astel. This is Josh's basically favorite intelligence weapon, and he wanted this weapon on this list, and for good reason. The Ash of War is actually insanely effective when it comes to specifically DPS. If you're able to get good magic damage, which again is also another type of damage that has really good damage and a lot of enemies are vulnerable to it, you can reliably spam that at reasonable range because it's quite a sort of arc where you place it. And if you just repeatedly place it, it pops and pops and pops. Because it's an Ash of War, that will actually stagger many bosses, and you don't need to worry about getting a critical. You can just keep doing the Ash over and over. In fact, the reason this weapon is on this list is because of the ridiculous DPS DPS potential of spamming that Ash on a dummy on a single spot, and that is actually quite possible because the Ash only takes a moment to go off. Even if you only get to cast it like 2 or 3 times in a row, the boss is going to interrupt you. You just roll it and then immediately do the next one. The cast is that quick. There are many ways to improve your magic damage, of course. As a weapon, it's incredible though, and we've always thought that. That unique R2 that costs no FP to use, outrageous. So yeah, one of the best weapons in the game, no doubt. But now another weapon that is no doubt one of the best weapons in the game. Yeah, it's the Blasphemous Blade. It makes it to number 6 in my opinion. This is because as much as this weapon is pretty much the best weapon in the game overall, due to the insane passives and benefits you have by having this weapon equipped, by attacking with it, by having it on your back, the Ash of War just being ridiculous, or say the mix of fire and physical, which is a top tier combination. Ultimately, its DPS potential and power comes from the Ash of War though. That's where it's the heaviest hitting, and it's a long range, wide reaching that deals fire damage, which is insane in certain fights. We tested this not too long ago with a fun mix of dragon incantations and found that it's actually able to steamroll even the hardest bosses like, yes, Malenia to this day. You're getting the benefit of lifesteal, which is just wonderful, but the damage alone genuinely is very impressive. The DPS per second isn't as high as other weapons on this list, but it's so consistent because it's a quick and long range cast. You can repeatedly cast it in the shorter punish windows and from long range, giving you consistent opportunities to deal that damage. You could argue that its DPS is higher than say MOHGWYN or Hand of Malenia if you can't get those off, whereas Blasphemous Blade, you can still get that Ash off in so many small punish windows. The limiting factor though is the fact that the DPS isn't as high as other weapons, and it's not going to do as much damage in say a single hit as other weapons on the list as well. So let's move on to one of our weapons that does a lot of damage in one hit, the Dark Moon Greatsword. Quite a while ago, we were shocked by how powerful this single heavy attack at range is, because when you buff it up, you have access to the iconic Moonlight Greatsword arc attack, and it costs nothing, like a bit of stamina, no FP. I'm still bewildered that that was a thing. This is insane in all content, obviously, but because it's a charged heavy attack, you can get talismans to improve heavy attacks, you get talismans to improve charge attacks. It's magic damage, so we can Terra Magica, we can use other magic improving options, be it the armor, be it the other talisman. Wondrous physics as well for both magic damage and a heavy attack. Basically, it allows you to send out these staggering shots from range. You know, 6k a hit or higher from range on a quick cast. It's honestly ridiculous, and I'm glad because, you know, the Moonlight Greatsword, it's that weapon that's lived throughout the whole series, and to see it do so well in Elden Ring, it's just great. It is a very heavy hitting ranged weapon, considering it's a sword. Moving forward though to number 4, we have REDUVIA, which was massively improved in 1.08, so very recently. After the back of the nerf of power stand status build-up weapons being nerfed in terms of how much bleed build-up they can get, daggers now absolutely shine as one of the best, if not the best way to get bleed build-up. As a unique weapon, I believe this is the best pick for bleed weapons for bleed build-up. In 1.08, they buffed the daggers to have not only much better range, but much faster attack speed, and they were already pretty quick. This leads to the hilarious ability to power stance 2 Reduvias and just run up and just attack, burning through health pools and getting towards 20k or higher in a single burst. I believe you could get up to 30k if you're able to just keep attacking and not be interrupted, and there are ways to make that possible. This is also staggeringly effective in PvP, but that's not what we're worried about in this video. Plus, the Ash of War, which was given a melee aspect to it, you can actually spam that like a shotgun at point blank, dealing double damage, loads of bleed build up. That's also really effective as well. So it's a versatile weapon in that way. You have 2 ways to deal insane DPS and burst, up close using your melee attacks, or even at medium range with the Ash of War, or up close with that as well. It's a top tier weapon, a top tier bleed weapon, and it's great to see daggers do so well. Now we reach the top 3 though, so it's gonna have to be for me, number 3, the Envoy Longhorn, which I'm sure you were aware of was going to be on this list. Only a few months after the release of Elden Ring, people were going mental for this weapon because of its insane ability to DPS against large enemies, so you dragons and otherwise. If you can get under a boss that's big enough and just spam the bubble, it is just stupid. One of the highest burst options we found in Elden Ring to begin with in those opening months, and remains just crazy strong to this day. There are quite a few different bubble envoy weapons, and all of them are generally good, like for their weapon type and purpose, but the Longhorn stands out by far with its Ash spam specifically as just having the best output, and easily one of the best outputs in the entire game out of all of the weapons, let alone unique weapons. But there is another weapon that I believe has higher burst and DPS, and we'll get to that in a sec. But before that, number 2, it's the Giant's Crusher, because if you're looking to do the most damage in one single hit, there is not a better weapon than the Giant's Crusher. It has a unique heavy attack that is made for this purpose, and if you stack all of the different buffs to improve your damage, that is what this weapon will do. It will deal insane damage in one hit. I was able to quickly get about 16,000 in one hit on one of the scariest enemies in the entire game. Not only does that feel incredible and look great, but it's entirely viable to scale this a bit back. Not do something so silly that requires like 30 seconds of build up and then you need to die in like the next second. Something more viable where you're dealing like 5 or 6k a hit, staggering enemies with those hits as well. You could even run a heavy build where you are just max heavy, max poise, making it so you're a trading machine and just chunking out health bars with heavy attack after heavy attack. This is exactly what I did in a video, and it's just stupidly effective. Also, the weapon does more damage to giants, so that's cool. But there is one weapon that's going to deal more damage. Maybe not in a single hit, but arguably it kind of does. The MARAIS Executioner Sword. Because this was buffed up to be a lot more controllable where you can roll out of it, which is nice. But ultimately, it's all about that Beyblade aspect, that spinning, that corkscrew attack, and that dealing successive damage. As I've mentioned in this video, there are many ways to improve your successive damage massively, and there is not a better weapon for building up successive hits in a short period. You basically use one Ash of War and get an absolute peak spike of AR, and if you can get off a second one, well then most things are just going to die, as you can see. It is just outrageously effective for that purpose. And while you might not be doing say 16k in one single hit, you'll be doing a lot more than that in 2 Ashes of War successfully going through. And that's controllable because now we can roll out of it. If you mess up, you can just roll an attack and try again. Obviously damage like that causes many enemies to stagger and sway and get knocked down, and then you can just go to town on them. It's just stupidly effective, much like its smaller version, the Regalia of Eocade. But since the MARAIS Execution Sword is the same thing but better, I'm only giving the Regalia sort of a mention here. It could have easily been on this list and maybe even been like number 2 or 3 or something, but that'd be a bit boring. In my opinion then, the MARAIS Execution Sword is the highest spike burst damage in the game, and if you're looking to chew through bosses, I reckon it's your best pick. But there you have it, those are the 10 weapons I believe have some of the most outrageous damage and DPS opportunities for unique weapons. But what do you think? Are there any weapons I've missed that could have sneaked in a spot? There are some seriously powerful, unique weapons in this game, and obviously there's a lot more than just 10 of them. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.